Perspectives on hot issues in our society have become more extreme. We live in a divided world where people have strong opinions on topics like climate change, migration, racism or nationalism, or how to deal with the current pandemic. We base our own opinion upon personal experiences, media reports, and social media. But we rarely do our own research by talking to people that think differently and trying to understand the origin of their beliefs and emotions. In my work as a documentary photographer, I often tell stories about people whose voices are seldom heard. One of my projects is about living together in cultural diversity. I was just as curious about the stories and convictions of the white nationalists as about those of migrants. And my curiosity brought me to Bresseux, a migrant neighborhood in Liège in Belgium, not far from my hometown, Maastricht. I started photographing and filming there in 2016, and 4 years later it resulted into I Believe, The World in a Suburb, an interactive multimedia documentary in English, French and Dutch. This map is your starting point to discover Bresseux from behind your laptop. You can wander around for hours just by clicking on one of the 27 icons to start a story. And with every click, a door opens where outsiders usually don't enter. You will meet wise and friendly people. And no matter where they come from or how they were educated, each of them has something to say that's valuable for you and me to better understand the complex world we live in. And at the same time, it's an opportunity to consider, reconsider your own assumptions. Let me show you some of the people I met. This is Popeye. He's from Belgium, and he has been a sailor for his entire life. White people first. That's what Popeye represents in this documentary. He believes that the borders should close. And he also understands why people are becoming increasingly racist. But is he really a racist? Popeye showed me that he doesn't really hate migrants and refugees. He even buys his daily bread in their shops because it's cheaper and always fresh. His hatred is more against politicians who don't do anything for him, while migrants receive assistance. Popeye feels neglected. This is Mariam, originally from Senegal. She is a modern Muslimah, respecting both her own traditions as the fundamental values of our liberal society. With her platform, she inspires and helps other women to become free and autonomous citizens. Her message to migrants is, don't come here to take only. Come here to develop your talents and contribute to this country. Working in Bresseux was a continuous confrontation with my own beliefs, my own prejudgments, and my own ignorance. One day, at the end of the Ramadan period, I visited El Itassam, the biggest of the two mosques, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The mosque had transformed into a cheerful, noisy children's playground.
Chez nous, on a deux grandes fêtes principalement. C'est la fête de la rupture du jeûne et la fête du sacrifice. Comme c'est des fêtes qui sont très importantes, le centre organise tout le temps, depuis des années, à chaque fête, une journée récréative où On a des châteaux gonflables, des barbes à papa, des chics, à manger, à boire. Et 2 fois l'année, on fait ça pour les enfants.
This picture was taken the same day. These women were having a conversation while their children were playing. Now take a moment to think about how this picture was framed inside your brain just now. How did you look at them? What was your first idea about who they are and how they live? The woman on the right is Hyatt. She was curious about what I was doing in the mosque with my camera, and we had a conversation. And because of her traditional dressing and her headscarf, I unconsciously assumed that Hyatt was a Muslim mother with little education, staying at home and taking care of the children. Well, I couldn't have been more mistaken. Hyatt turned out to be a leading researcher in the field of biochemistry, with a PhD, working in the university lab, with publications in the world's most renowned scientific magazines. Making this documentary also helped me to better understand complex processes like integration. Ilou, for example, says he feels well integrated. He works for the government and he is politically active. And Ilou taught me that every migrant feels a need to stay connected to one's own traditions. But this doesn't mean they don't accept our European values. In fact, migrants come to Europe because of the way we live. They are attracted by our freedom of speech, our respect for human rights. They want to participate and contribute. They want to have a regular life like everyone else. And they want to be accepted for who they are. As Ilou says in his film, referring to an old African saying, no matter how long a tree stays in the river, it will never become a crocodile. His message is, don't expect that a migrant will transform into somebody that looks and thinks like you do. The only thing we can change is the way we look at each other. Pursue is an experiment in living together in cultural diversity. It has become an ethnic mosaic where different groups live side by side and tolerate the other at best. Social protection is provided by their own group, and each community tries to keep out unwanted external influences as much as possible. People will tell you, but my door is always open for strangers. Yes, and it's true. If you do go inside, if you enter, you'll be warmly welcomed. But reality is, nobody does. The only people that do enter are people from their own community. So, no, they don't mix. But why do I see that as a problem? I was left with this question unanswered after publishing the documentary online. And I started wondering, what does it take for people from different communities to come together and make a lasting connection? Well, sometimes it takes a disaster. I discovered this while working on a series of reports for a newspaper about the devastating floods that hit the region just around Bressou in July 2021. Heavy rains turned lovely streams into torrential rivers that washed away houses, cars, roads and bridges and killed more than 40 people in this region. In some places, the tidal wave was up to 8 meters high, and people had to stay on their roof for more than 2 days before they were rescued. This is Pietro in his living room. When the water came so fast, he only just managed to escape to the upper floor. As soon as the water dropped, volunteers from other regions came to help. And it was mainly the Dutch-speaking Flemish that moved to the French-speaking Walloon region where the disaster took place. And that wasn't as obvious as it sounds. In Belgian society, these two populations rarely meet and mainly think negatively about each other, although they live in the same country. Up to now, more than 4 months after disaster took place, people are still living in very unhealthy conditions. Their houses are damp and cold. Mushrooms grow out of their walls. There's no hot water, no kitchen to prepare a proper meal. And people are frustrated and angry because they don't hear from their government or their insurance company. So, volunteers keep coming every weekend to help them. They bring food, refrigerators, and stoves. They do heavy construction works in shifts so that the bricks can dry. And they give mental support to people that are sick of living in circumstances that do not improve. As a result of this, the way the Flemish volunteers and the Walloon victims think about each other has fundamentally changed. They have now come to realize that they've been brainwashed by everything they read and heard in the past about the group on the other side of the language border. Carl Gustav Jung, the famous psychologist, once said, "An encounter between two personalities is like putting two chemicals together. When a response follows, both have changed." For me, as a photographer, my camera is a perfect excuse to knock on the doors of people I've never met before. For the two populations in Belgium, it was a disaster that brought them together. And what is it that you need to open yourself to everything you don't yet know? Thank you.